welcome back to the Stitch Sessions. In today's tutorial, we are going to work on making this really sweet baby pumpkin hat, and it's topped off with its very own little topper with leaves, and I just think it's super adorable. Of course, you can size this for any size, and I'll make sure to leave a chart, a hat sizing chart, in the description box down below, which is on my website, which is crochetcrafty.com. Make sure to come and visit me there. Lots of fun little treats and gifts for you guys. So if you are new here, my name is Karen, and I love all things to do with crafting with crochet. And if you're not new here, welcome back. I always love having you guys come and hang out with me every Wednesday. So you'll notice that this hat has a little bit of texture to it, which I thought lent itself perfectly to creating this pumpkin idea. And the stitch we used was the Floret stitch. Now I've used this in a few other projects before. We've made the baby bonnet with this. We've also done the Floret stitch boot cuffs. I think it was last fall we did it. Or it might be actually the fall before it. Time is getting away from me. But in any case, you may recognize the stitch. It's really easy. If you know how to do double crochets and slip stitches, you will be good to go. And I just thought it worked out perfect for this pumpkin type of motif. So we start at the top. We create our little topper here first, and then we work our way downwards. And at the very end, we create our little brim here, and it's just using slip stitches. Then we come back and we add the leaves on the top, and I'm so happy with how it came out. So without further ado, let's talk about the materials we're going to need for this project. Okay, so to create our pumpkin hat, I used this impeccable yarn by Loops and Threads, and the color, in case you are wondering, is actually called pumpkin. So how appropriate is that? These skeins come in 127.5 grams. Wow, that's very specific. And it contains 260 meters or 285 yards. You will definitely not need more than this for your hat of any size, really. If you're doing this for a young child or a baby, you might even get some mittens out of this as well, or maybe a scarf and a hat. So there's a lot in here to work with. It is a medium 4-weight yarn. And for your topper, you'll just need kind of a contrasting color. I had a little bit of this green left over. It is the Heartland yarn, which I love so much. You guys have seen me use this in several projects. So just a little bit here to create the topper and the leaves at the end. And then we're moving on to the hooks. So I have 2 hooks here. These yarns are both considered a medium 4-weight yarn. So I'm going to be using a 6mm hook for this project, just so that the stitches sit a little bit more cushy, a little looser. It's also known as a J or a size 10. And for the topper and the leaves, I'm actually going to go down to the 5mm hook, which is also known as an H or a size 8, okay, for those of you that go by letters. So I chose the smaller hook for the topper just because I wanted that to sit a little bit tighter, a little bit more snugly. And of course, as always, make sure that you have a handy pair of scissors and a yarn needle. Make sure it's a yarn needle. You see it's got a nice big eye to sew in your ends at the end. And if you're a little bit newer and you might find it useful, I would have a stitch marker on hand or a safety pin, anything you like to use as a stitch marker. So let's get going. Okay, so we're going to begin by creating our topper there, or our stem, I should say. And so we're going to start by creating a cinch circle. So it's similar to the slip knot, but we're not going to close it shut. We're just going to pull up a loop and then try our best to chain 1. Okay, so you've got your magic ring, and then I just like to pull that tail out there. Into this ring, we want to place 6 single crochets. So you're just going to insert into the ring, pull up a loop, and single crochet. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. And now you're going to just take that tail and you're going to pull so you can cinch your circle shut nice and tight. Okay, so you can see the stitches come nice and closely together. And then what you want to do is normally you would slip stitch to join your round in most projects. We're going to be working in the spiral round, so we are not going to slip stitch. We're just going to continuously single crochet around. So just remember that you've always got 6 stitches with every round. Now, if you're a little bit newer, you may want to use a stitch marker just to remind you of where the beginning and end of your round is. But we do this for just such a few number of rounds that I don't really ever worry about it. I just always count 6. So now we begin the next round by just going into the very next stitch that we have there, and we're going to single crochet right away. So you may have to help it along, that first little stitch there. Jeez. Okay, and then single crochet. So that's 1. And then into the next one. That's 2. So there's no increases here. And then into the next one is 3. And 4. And the next one is 5. Gets a little bit tricky because it's pretty tight here right now, right? But it will get better, I promise. And then there is 6. Just like that. Okay, so we've completed round 2, and you should be seeing that it's starting to curl, and that is exactly what we want. So I'm just going to make sure that my tail stays to the inside, just like that. Okay, so I'm going to go on to round number 3. And you can snip that tail if it distracts you. So I'm just simply going to continue on into the very next stitch, which is right there. And again, these are pretty tight because there's no increases in these rounds. So you definitely have to help it along. Just pack your patience a little bit. So there's 1. Oops. So there's 1. And there's 2. Just like that. So this is just the trick. So this is the trickiest part of this project, is creating that little stem there. And there's 3. And then once you start building up a height, it does get a little bit easier. So there's 4. And then there is 5. And there is 6. So I've completed round number 3. I still have 6 stitches around. I'm just going to pull this out. So there's my tail in here, which I'm going to actually snip off here so that it doesn't distract you guys. Just like that. Okay, so just wanted to kind of figure out where my opening was, because it can be a little bit confusing. It's very tight. So if I just put my hook in there, you can see that it's 6 stitches and we just keep building. So because we're not increasing, that's what creates the curl and the need for it to kind of come up. So when you see this one, we began down here and we worked our way up. So we've now completed 3 rounds, and we need to do 1 more to create the height of this one. Now I'm making this for a baby, so I did 4 rounds. If you're doing yours for an older child, you might want to do 5 to 6 rounds if you really want the stem to be very prominent, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and finish the next round, and then I'm gonna meet back up with you to talk about how just to create that little topper at the top before we change colors to create the body of our pumpkin. Okay, so I've completed my 4 rounds, and now I'm ready to start increasing, thankfully. So what we're gonna do now is into the following stitch, we are gonna place 2 single crochets. So we have 1 and we have 2. Okay, so you're gonna do that into every single stitch. So at the end of round number 5, you are going to have 12 stitches in total. So I'm just trying to make sure, find the next stitch. So I have 1. I promise you, once you get through this stem, the rest will be easy. And there's 2, okay? So 2 into each stitch. At the end of round 5, you can already see it starting to flare out like that. You're gonna have 12 stitches. Okay, so at the end of round number 5, you can see it starting to flare out now. We are going to slip stitch to join. So this is our next stitch here, and we're just gonna slip stitch to join. And there we go. So now we can actually see the little topper coming up. And okay, we've got 1 more round for our topper here, and that is round number 6. And we are now going to use double crochet stitches. So I told you it's getting a little easier. So we're going to chain 3 to begin, okay? And then back into that same stitch, we're going to place a double crochet. Okay, so now we have this chain 3 counts as 1, and that's a double crochet. So there's 2 there. Into the next stitch, we're only going to place 1 double crochet. And that is going to be the repeat for this round. So into the next one, we have 2. And hopefully in this bunch here, I'm gonna have just enough yarn left. So I need to put a second one in here. Okay, so in the beginning, we did 2 into 1, then we have an individual one, and then we have 2. And so that means we're only gonna put 1 into the next. So we have 2, 1, 2, 1, all the way around. And at the end of round number 6, you are gonna have 18 stitches. Okay, I'm so excited. I actually had more than I thought I was gonna have left over. So I have 18 stitches. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna find the top of that 3rd chain, and I'm going to slip stitch to join my round. And I will be done with the green yarn for a while. Okay, so I'm just going to slip stitch. Wow, it is very windy out there. I'm not sure if you guys can hear that. Okay, so I'm going to chain 1. I am going to snip my yarn here. And my topper is complete. And actually, this might actually just be enough for those leaves. So I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so we have our topper here. Okay. And you can either weave this end in now, or you can just work over it as we start working on the body of our pumpkin, which is what we are going to do next. Okay, this is where I'm now going to pick up my 6mm hook, and we're going to introduce our orange yarn here. Okay, and so we've now completed 6 rounds of our topper. So from here on out, starting with the orange, I'm just going to start that as round 1 of the main body, just to kind of keep things nice and simple. So what we're going to do is we're going to place a slip knot on our hook. And then we're going to pick up our topper. and we're going to slip stitch to join. Now I always like to kind of move just slightly away from the last knot just to kind of keep it nice and even. So I'm just going to come back here, just going to insert my hook right there, and I'm going to slip stitch to join my yarn, just like that. Okay, so now we are going to begin using the floret stitch, and that's what gives it that really cool texture. So we're going to begin by chaining 1, and then we are going to slip stitch into the next stitch. And I'm going to try and work over that tail if I can, just like that. Okay, actually I'll just leave that tail there and sew that in after. So we've got a slip stitch, and now into the next stitch we are going to place a double crochet. So you're just going to yarn over and double crochet. So the floret stitch is created by alternating between a slip stitch and a double crochet. We want to make sure, however, that we're still following the basic principles of creating a circle, because we're working on the crown of the hat, so we still need the circle to spread out flat before we start to curve down. So in the previous round, we had done an increase into every second stitch, but now we're going to do an increase into every third stitch. So we've done 1 slip stitch, 1 double crochet. Now into the next stitch, we're going to do the slip stitch and the double crochet into the same stitch, because that's what creates an increase. So you can see here we have our slip stitch here from the previous round. So I'm just going to insert my hook there. It might be a little bit tighter. My next stitch is a slip stitch. So I'm just going to slip stitch. Now when you're doing your slip stitches, really be aware to keep them somewhat loose, because we have to come back and work into them. Yeah. And then I'm going to double crochet, but right back into the same stitch. So we've done a slip stitch and a double crochet into the same stitch, which creates our first increase. Okay. And now into the next stitch, which is right there, we're going to place a slip stitch. So remember, we're continuously alternating between a slip and a double crochet. Then into the next stitch, we double crochet. So you slip and double, slip and double. Now into the next stitch, it's an increase. So we place both of them in the same stitch. So we slip stitch, and then we double crochet. Again, keeping it nice and relaxed. Oops. So you can see it's kind of creating that bumpy texture. And so with this project, unlike other projects in the round where we would just slip stitch, chain up, and then continue facing the same way, we're actually going to turn our work back and forth. And that is what's going to help push the texture to our right side, which is the side that has the topper on it. Okay, so for now we continue on. So we've just done an increase. So into the next stitch, we're just going to place a slip stitch. And then into the next stitch, we place a double crochet. So we have 2 stitches on their own, and then into the next, we place an increase, which means a slip stitch, and then a double crochet back into the same stitch. And you're going to keep repeating that all the way to the end. Okay, so in the previous round we had 18 stitches, and in the next round we are going to have 24 stitches in total. So go ahead and finish round number 1, and I'll meet up with you at the end. Okay, so I've come up to the end of round 1, and I have 22 stitches, and you can see how the texture is really coming through there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the slip stitch there. I'm going to just ignore that chain 1, and I'm going to insert my hook, and I'm going to slip stitch to join. Now, because we're working with increases, this won't always necessarily follow perfectly the main principle of the floret stitch. And again, that's because there are going to be increases. But we are going to chain one, and we're going to turn our work. So if we didn't have increases, whenever you turn your work, you should be able to place a slip stitch on top of a double crochet and a double crochet on top of a slip stitch. That won't always necessarily be the case here because of those increases, but don't worry, because as you do subsequent rounds, it will all kind of work out nicely. So, and then let me just turn this here, just because sometimes counting stitches with slip stitches can be tricky. So you've got a stitch there, and then there's a slip stitch, a stitch there, and there's a slip stitch. So see how the slip stitch can get really nestled in there. So that's why it's important not to stitch that too tightly. So we've got 22 stitches all the way around. We've slip stitched to join, we've chained one and turned. So my next stitch here, if I pull my work apart, see, that's the double crochet. So you can see it's got the longer post, and then I've got a slip stitch here. So I'm going to begin this round with a double crochet. So I always at least try to start with the opposite stitch I ended up with. So right away here, I'm going to yarn over. I'm going to insert my hook right away into that first stitch, which is a double crochet. And then you're just going to stretch that a little bit, just like that. And there you go. Okay. Into the next stitch, you're going to slip stitch. So if I turn that over, see, that's where the double crochet was. So far we're following that kind of alternate pattern. And then into the next stitch, which is right there, we're going to place a double crochet. So we've now done 3 stitches, and then we're going to increase. So now we're increasing into every 4th stitch. So this is round number 2 of our body. And again, because of the bumpiness, it can be a little tricky to see. So make sure you turn your work so you can see the tops of your stitches. So that's our next stitch there. So we are going to place a slip stitch and then a double crochet right back into that same stitch, just like that. So that's our increase, okay? And then we keep doing the same thing all the way around. So we have 3 individual stitches. So my next one is a slip stitch. Now you can see it's falling into a slip stitch, so you're just going to go ahead and maintain that, okay? Because it will kind of work itself out in subsequent rounds. So I have a slip stitch, and then I have a double crochet. That's my second stitch, and the 3rd stitch is a slip stitch, and then I'm going to increase. So when we increase, we'll then go back to alternating on top of opposite stitches. So that's why I said don't worry too much about it. Just continue to follow the basic principles of a circle. So we're going to place a double crochet and a slip stitch back into the same stitch. Okay? So you're going to keep doing that all the way around until you get to the end. You will slip stitch to join. The end of our second round of our body, you should have 30 stitches. Okay, so I finished round number 2 of our body, which technically is round number 8 of our whole project. Okay, so if those of you are keeping track from the very first round. And I have 30 stitches all the way around. So I just love how that texture is coming out. Doesn't that look very pumpkin-y? I love it. Okay, so I am going to chain 1 and turn my work. So now I'm facing the front again. Now this very first stitch here is a double crochet stitch. So I'm going to place a slip stitch into that. So I always like to start with the opposite of what I got. Slip stitch there, okay? And then into the next stitch, I'm going to double crochet. So that's 2 stitches. I need to go 4 stitches. So the next one is a slip stitch, and then the next one is a double crochet again. So now our increases are going to go into every 5th stitch. Okay, so I've got 4 stitches up. And by the way, as you work up rounds, see how that it's easy to maybe get a little bit lost. I would recommend putting a stitch marker in that first stitch there just to help you find your way back. But as always, I tell people count backwards. If you know the number of stitches you're supposed to have in this round, just count backwards from your hook and usually you can find the very first stitch. But if it's because these stitches are crunching into each other, I would recommend having a stitch marker there. Okay, so into the next stitch, we are going to increase. So we're going to place a slip stitch into that very next stitch and double crochet. Okay, so we've created an increase. So in this round, you're going to do 4 stitches, an increase, 4 stitches, an increase, etc., etc. So at the end of round 3 of our body, you should have 36 stitches. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. So go ahead and do that. And then you're going to do this. You're going to keep increasing for a few more rounds. And what we want to do is we want to reach the diameter of a hat size for a baby. Okay, so if you reference that sizing chart for children or for babies actually, you will go down the list and there should be a section for like head measurements and hat measurements. And so under the baby 0 to 3 months, your diameter should be anywhere between 4 to 4.5 inches. Now I always like adding a little bit extra just in case they grow into it, depending on the season, right? So I'm making this for my brand new niece. And so she has just been born, so she is definitely going to be using this in the fall. So I'm going to stick to the traditional baby size. So I'm going to go until I get a crown width or diameter of 4.5 inches, which works out to approximately 11.5 centimeters. Okay, so go ahead and do that. And once you reach your desired crown diameter, I'll meet up with you there and then we'll continue working the rest of the body of our pumpkin hat. Okay, so I have completed now 5 rounds in the orange and I have reached my diameter. So I am looking for between 4 to 4.5 inches across and I'm just shy of 4.5 inches. So this is where I'm going to stop repeating. I have a total of 48 stitches. So if you're making this for a baby from 0 to 3 months like I am, you will stop here. So now what we're going to do is we need to build the rest of the body of our hat, which is going to give us the body of our pumpkin. So we're not going to increase anymore, but we are going to continue to create subsequent rounds until we get the hat depth that we're looking for. So once the hat gets formed and it's able to be folded down, the depth is going to be basically from the crown all the way to where we want the brim to be, okay? And for 0 to 3 months, we are looking for a hat depth of approximately 6 inches or 15.5 centimeters. So I'm going to get you started here on round 6, which is very straightforward. So I'm going to chain 1, and because I finished on this side, I'm going to turn my work. So I'm going to work from the back side. And I am just simply going to place 1 stitch into each stitch all the way around. So my stitch count is 48 stitches, and it will remain that way until I reach my brim portion. What I just want to be aware of here is my last stitch was a double crochet stitch, so I'm going to begin with a slip stitch. So my aim is to stack the opposing stitches on top of the stitch. So I'm going to start right there. I'm going to place a slip stitch, again, not too tightly. And then into the next stitch, which is a slip stitch from the previous row, I'm going to place a double crochet. So I'm continuing on with the floret stitch, and now the rest is easy. The next stitch I will place a slip, and the next stitch I will place a double crochet, and it should always work out that my double crochets will fall into a slip stitch and a slip stitch will fall on top of a double crochet. Okay, just like that. So you can see it's creating this really cool texture. So that is all you're going to do all the way around, and then you're going to slip stitch to join, chain one, and turn your work. So for this project, even though we're working in the round, we're going to continue to turn our work. So I'm going to go ahead and do my body, and I'm just going to keep doing rows and rows and rows, or sorry, I should say rounds and rounds and rounds, until I get my 6 inches in depth. So I will meet you back here shortly. Okay, so I have finished 20 rounds of the orange. I just love that texture. And so I have the 6 inches or 15.5 centimeters that I need in my hat depth. So you see, once we stopped increasing, it just naturally starts to curve downwards and creates our little hat shape. So the last thing that we're going to do here is create the brim of our hat. So for this, I'm actually going to bring back my 5mm hook, and I'm going to use this just to kind of get the brim to snuggle in a little bit more around the head here. So here we go. Okay, so I finished on kind of facing the inside. So I'm going to chain up 7, and then I'm going to turn my work. So I'm going to do a chain of 7. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Okay, so you have something like that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into each of these chains, and I'm going to slip stitch all the way across. So I'm going to skip this first chain here, and I'm going to go into the second one, and I'm going to slip stitch across. It's really important here, as before, not to slip stitch too tightly, because we're going to have to work back into those stitches again. So I'm just going to slip stitch all the way down, one at a time, nice and relaxed. And there is my last one there. Okay, so now I've got something that looks like this, and I now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stitches. And so I always want to have those 6 stitches as I move up and down. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the very next stitch. So this stitch we had slip stitch to join. So into the next stitch, which is right there, we're going to slip stitch again. So this anchors this row here, just like that. And now I'm going to slip stitch into the next stitch as well. So I slip stitch into the next one. And then at this point, I'm going to turn my work so that now we can work back down. So what I always want to make sure is that I skip those 2 slip stitches, so 1 and 2, and into the third one, I'll begin slip stitching to go back. And so I'm working into the back loops of those slip stitches, and I slip stitch back up. So again, reiterating not to slip stitch too tightly. Okay, and now I have the very last stitch, which is usually that turning chain here. And so I'm just going to go into the back loops there, just like that, and slip stitch. So again, this is the end of row number 2, so I should still have 6 stitches. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 right there. And this is what I'm going to repeat. So we're going to chain 1 here, turn our work, and we're going to continue to slip stitch back down the way. So you're always going to have 6 stitches here. And then once you get down here, you're going to slip stitch into the next stitch, and then in the next stitch before we turn our work and come back up. So we're essentially just creating our brim by going up, down, and inserting into each stitch all the way around. So this will take you a little while because it's all slip stitches and it's going to require some patience. So definitely pack your patience, okay? So I've done a chain one here. I've turned, and then I always go into the second stitch, so I never count that first chain. Turn around and slip stitch. And that is what I'm going to continue doing until I get down to the end. And then I do 2 slip stitches, turn, and continue. So you're going to keep going all the way around, and I'm going to meet back up with you once we're ready to close up our little seam there, and then the basic body of our pumpkin hat will be done. And then we've got one more little thing to add on to this. So you're going to stop the video and I'll meet back up with you in a little while. Okay, so I have finished my brim. So you can see it creates this really nice stretchy little band around the edge there. And so now what's left to do is actually seam these 2 sides together, okay? So when I've done my last row here, I only slip stitch once into the edge here because basically this next stitch already belongs to this round. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna hold these 2 together, these 2 edges, and so I'm going to go into the back loop of this next row here. So I'm gonna skip this slip stitch there. I'm going to insert my hook into the back loop like I normally would do, but now I also want to pick up the front loop of the corresponding row. So I just want to make sure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I want to make sure that it's nice and even. So I've got the loop on my hook, the back loop of this row here, and the front loop of that one, and I'm just going to pull it through all 3 loops, okay? And that's what's going to start to seal up your brim. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to come here. There is the back loop. I'm going to insert, and then the front loop of the next stitch, which is right there, and then pulling through all 3. Okay, so you can see it's starting to seal it up. So I'm going to go ahead and finish my last step on the brim, and then I'm going to meet up with you guys to talk about the final little touch on the topper of our hat. Okay, so I just wanted to show you guys. So I just finished doing my brim. I'm just going to fasten off there. And I just wanted to show you how it pretty much blends in to the brim. You can barely see where the seam is. And then what I'll do is I'm just going to weave this end in back and forth a couple of times. I'm going to hide that. And then we're going to come back and add the little leaves to the top of our hat. But it's pretty much done. The basic structure of the hat is pretty much done. So you've got the brim, and notice how it does kind of pinch in a bit. Pinch is not the word I'm looking for, but because it's still nice and stretchy. But this is what's going to help the hat also sit nice and snugly on the head. And if you find that it's a bit long in the beginning, you can always just turn the brim up. Look at that. Look at how sweet that is with the little topper. So now let's move on to creating the leaves. Okay, so I think I just have enough left for the leaves, which was perfect. So what we're going to do is we're going to begin by placing a slip knot on our hook here. Okay, and we want to begin by chaining up 8. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. This is going to be the spine of our leaf. So now what we're going to do is we're going to find the second chain from the hook. We never count the one that's on the hook, remember? So we have 1 and 2, and we are going to slip stitch into that very first stitch here, just like that. And into the next stitch, we're going to place a single crochet. So now we're going to pull through and pull through 2. Into the next stitch, we're going to place a half double crochet. So we're going to yarn over first, insert, pull up a loop, so you have 3 loops, and then you're going to yarn over and pull through all 3. So you can see that gradually we're creating a little bit of height. So because the leaf has that oval type shape with points on the end, I think it's called an ellipse, but I'm not sure. So we need to increase the height of our stitches as we get closer to the center of our leaf. And so the next stitch is going to be a double crochet. So we pull through, and we only pull through the first 2, and then we yarn over and we pull through the next 2. So you can really see it's come up nice and tall. So now we've reached the center of the leaf, and now we need to decrease the size back down. So into the next stitch, we're going to place a half double crochet. And then into the next stitch, we're going to place a single crochet. And then we have 1 stitch left, and into that stitch, we are going to slip stitch. Just like that. So you can see that's 1/2 of a leaf. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to work back around the other side of our spine. So we are going to chain 1. That's going to help us come around the bend here. And then right back into that same stitch we slip stitched into, we're going to slip stitch again. Whoops. Just like that. See? Now we're working along the bottom of that spine. Into the next stitch, remember we're going to start increasing again. We are going to place a single crochet. And then into the following stitch, we're going to place a half double crochet. So these stitches should now be mirroring what is on the other side of the spine. See? And so the next stitch is a double crochet. So we pull through 2 and then pull through 2. You can really see it's starting to take shape there. And now we need to decrease our size. So we put a half double crochet stitch. So you pull through all 3. And then we're going to place a single crochet. And into the very last one, we are going to slip stitch. And that is actually a chain. So we're going to go through that loop and we're going to slip stitch to join. And there you have a leaf motif. Isn't that sweet? So we need to create 2. So we're not going to fasten off. We're actually going to chain up another 8. Okay, so we're going to chain 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. See that? So both of the leaves are going to be nice and attached. So we repeat that all over again. So into the second chain from the hook, we begin with a slip stitch, then a single crochet into the next one, then a half double crochet into the next one, and then a double crochet. So we're following exactly the same pattern we did for the first leaf. Then we go down, we have a half double crochet here, a single crochet here, and now we're getting close to the other leaf there. And there's one more stitch there. We're going to slip stitch into that one. Okay, so you can see how they're forming. So now we're going to do is we are going to chain one like we did before. And essentially we're just going to ignore this leaf for a moment and we're going to turn around and go right back into the same stitch we just slip stitched out of, which is right there. And we're going to slip stitch to begin the other side. See that? And then into the next stitch, which is right there, we're going to single crochet and then half double, and you know the drill. Okay, so just wanted to show you that, see, those leaves look like they're together, but they're not together, so to speak. Okay, and then the next one is a double crochet and then a half double crochet, single crochet, and lastly a slip stitch right into that last one there. And our leaves are complete. Okay, so what you're going to do, oh my goodness, look at that, perfect length. So I'm just going to fasten off. And we've got our two leaves. So see how it actually naturally sits just nicely like that. So what I would recommend you do is just weave in these ends, and then you're going to need another piece, maybe, I like one double this length, even though you're probably not going to use all of it, maybe about 12 inches long, just to sew in your leaves right along the top here. So we would just fasten it pretty close to the stalk. Look at how adorable that is. So that's it, that's all. So I'm going to go ahead, weave these in, and then I'm going to sew that to the top. And all you're really doing is you're just sewing in through these top two leaves here. I'll actually just pop back on. For those of you that are a little bit newer, I'll weave in these ends and then I'll just come back and quickly show those of you that are a little bit newer, okay? Okay, so I have sewn in my ends there, and now I've got a new piece, and I'm just going to thread it through my yarn needle, and this is why yarn needle is what you need and not a thread needle. Okay, so just have it like that, and then I'm just going to take the hat here, and for me I just want to make sure that where I seamed up, see, it's pretty good, you can hardly see it, but I do know that it's here. So I want that seam portion, see, on the back of my hat here. Whoops, it's a little flyaway there. So that way the leaves sit on the front. And then you can always tell what part is the front. So that's where I'm going to insert. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go up into my hat here. And I'm just going to bring my needle, whoops, through right about there. Okay, so it's coming up right at the base of the stalk. And then I'm going to take my leaves and I'm going to try and bring them up right through the tips of that one. And then the tip of this one. So that it really looks like they're both anchored there. And then I'm going to come up and pull that through. I don't want to pull it all the way through, so I want to make sure that I can still see my little tail here. So that way I can tie it in afterwards. So that's good enough. And now I'm just going to go back and forth, in and out, always trying to find a different place to go back into. And that way I can kind of tie it down. You don't really need to go in and out very many times, but just a couple of times, because then you're going to knot it on the inside. Now, some people might actually want to sew the whole thing down so it stays down. That's a personal preference. That might work out nicely, especially if you wash it several times. It might, so you can see it tends to curl up. But I like the fact that it's, you know, it sits there kind of flopping around, much more natural looking. And then I just kind of come back in, and basically you're just going to feel your way around so that you want to always kind of find the center of the tips of those leaves. See, just like that. And now I can see it's starting to be secured. And then I always want to kind of come back down closer to the stalk, because I want those leaves to look like they're coming out from the stalk. And just pulling it a little tight. And then you just kind of have a look at it, see how you like it. I'd probably like these to sit up a little bit higher. And so that's what you're going to do. You're just going to keep kind of going back and forth until you feel that your leaves are secure enough and that they're sitting where you would like them. Okay, and then I'm going to go one more time down into the center. I'm pretty happy with how it's sitting now. And I'm going to pull that through like that. And I'm just going to pull my needle out. And now I'm going to turn the hat inside out. So you can see I've got these two strands here. And this is where I'm just going to pull it a little bit snugly. And then I'm going to knot it a few times. So I like to do things in threes. So I have a second knot. And I have a third. And we are good to go. Okay, and then I'll cut this a little shorter. And then I'll weave in the last few bits here. I always like to leave a little bit of a tail and then weave it in as opposed to snipping it there. I just find it helps to really secure the knot and the excess yarn. And then when you're done, you just turn it inside out and guess what? Your pumpkin hat is complete. Look at how sweet that is. Now, if you wanted to do leaves all the way around, that would look super cute too. I would do them in sets of 2. And then, you could do 1 on each side and 1, so you'd have 8 leaves around, which actually would look super cute. So no matter where you turn the hat, you've got the leaves there. So see how it's flipping up? Thing is, once the hat is on, right, and it sits down, it's usually pretty good. But like I said, if you want to if you want to sew yours down completely, that's up to you. So I hope you've had such fun working on this sweet little hat. And like I said, you can work this for any size. I'll make sure, again, to leave the link to the sizing chart for hats in the description box down below. You can also check it out on the website at crochetcrafty.com. There's lots of bonus tools there, lots of sizing charts for any other projects. And while you're there, make sure to sign up for my monthly newsletter because I gift you a free written pattern every month. And if you'd like to look at any other written patterns, you can also visit my Etsy shop at Crochet Crafty Canada. Now, if you have any deeper questions about this project, you can always leave them for me in the comment box down below, or you can email me directly at info@crochetcrafty.com. And make sure to come and say hi to me. I'm on the socials. I'm on Facebook and Instagram at The Stitch Sessions. So happy Halloween, everybody. I know it's coming up in a couple of weeks. Happy fall. I am excited for you to jump into your pumpkin hat project. And make sure to share your finished items with me. Maybe you're going to use different colors. I'd be curious to see what colors you choose for your pumpkin hat if it's not orange and green. So make sure to tag me as well on Instagram and share those pictures with me. So in the meantime, thank you as always for supporting my crochet journey and supporting the channel. And every time you like, subscribe, share the video, donate a little bit through the thanks button, it really, really helps me out a lot to continue bringing more crochet tutorials for you. So by the way, if you're new here and you've enjoyed this tutorial, press that subscribe button. Come and hang out with me every Wednesday morning. I upload a brand new tutorial. All right, my friends. So I hope you have an amazing day. Happy crocheting as always. Take good care of yourselves, and I will see you guys in next week's session. Bye-bye.